It was a tragic plane crash. A Boeing 737 was like a brick, hitting the runway hard, then it skidded 600 meters before disintegrating and exploding. The accident killed 33 people, including 2 crew members. When the black box was released, 0.5 minutes of audio made. Everyone felt the despair. He was the 1997 China Southern Airlines 58 air disaster, May 8, 1997. 19:40 Chongqing Jiangbei International Airport. A Southern Airlines flight CZ-3456 was waiting to take off. The plane that flew the flight was a Boeing 737-300 aircraft, 3 years old at the time of the incident. It is still a new aircraft. The direct flight route is Chongqing to Guangzhou. A total of 65 passengers and 9 crew members were on board. There was a captain in the cockpit, the co-pilot, and an observer. The captain's name is Lin Yugui. He has 12,739 hours of flight experience, but in his long flying career 9,085 hours as a flight attendant, only 3,655 hours as a pilot. The co-pilot is Konde Sin. In the past few years, he has flown 11,200 hours as a flight engineer, but as a pilot, only 4,300 hours. Just by the number of hours flown, both pilots are experienced, but as real aircraft pilots, both have only been on the job for a little over 100 days, only 2 novice pilots, flight observers. It was also the first time they had flown with the plane. At 1945, the plane took off from Chongqing Jiangbei Airport. If there is no accident, they will arrive at Shenzhen Huangtian Airport in 105 minutes. Shortly after takeoff, the plane received a message from the air traffic control that Shenzhen Airport was experiencing heavy rainfall, but the crew unanimously decided to fly as usual, because under normal circumstances, as long as there are no major problems with the equipment, will not have much effect. That's all. This flight 3456, with 74 passengers and crew, embarked on a path of death. 1 hour after take, the entire flight did not encounter any unusual information. Looking out of the window, the sharp raindrops and the lightning flashing in and out, the passengers on board were a bit touched. You know that in 1997, the people who could fly on the plane were generally not ordinary people. After a flight of more than an hour, the plane arrived in Shenzhen airspace. The crew established contact with the Shenzhen airport tower. The tower told the crew that the landing runway was very rainy. Please report if you see the runway. The visibility was only over 1,000 meters, so the crew immediately disengaged the autopilot. Start preparing for blind landing. The co-pilot first requested to descend to 1,400 meters, which was denied, but just 10 seconds later, the tower told him that he could descend to 900 meters. So the crew began to control the aircraft to descend rapidly, but due to the high speed, the cockpit soon sounded a warning that the decline was low. At this point the captain had 2 choices: either resume flight or force a landing, but the captain at the time was a stick in the mud. He was overconfident and chose the latter. He asked the flight attendant to come to the cabin and tell the passengers the plane will soon arrive in Shenzhen. I hope the passengers will fasten their seat belts, pull down the shade to prepare for landing. At that moment, the plane glass was covered with raindrops. Outside is still a gray cloud, cannot see things. Seeing these bad conditions, the crew again contacted Shenzhen airport tower again. The crew suggested using runway 33 to land, but by this time it was already past 9 p.m. Visibility was very low. There was still heavy rain. There was still water on the runway. I couldn't see anything at all. After executing the landing procedure, the crew reported to the tower and suggested a busy landing at 21:00. The 1800 hours crew reported that they had seen the introduction lights. After hearing that, the tower just said flight 3456. After checking, it was ready for landing. Then the tower staff could clearly see the aircraft's landing lights were flashing. And according to the ground radar at that time, the aircraft's flight path and descent altitude, there was no problem. However, at this time everyone ignored a problem, that is the speed. 21:19. The plane ran to the south end of the ground again for the first time. At this point we will listen to a real recording.
没事，大一点没事。开始。OK。
Due to excessive speed during descent, the plane hit the runway hard and then the whole plane was pulled upward violently under the influence of the huge inertia. Passengers can be said to be flying up. Before the passengers could react, there was another thud. The plane's fuselage began to shake violently. After 3 bounces, the plane's speed was still very fast, although the crew did their best. But after the last bounce, the plane was still on the ground when, after dragging 600 meters, suddenly exploded. Thankfully, as soon as the passengers realized that the plane had failed to land, many people ran towards the rear of the plane. It was because of this action many of the passengers were able to survive, but even so, of the 65 passengers on the plane, 33 people died instantly. In addition, 2 flight attendants died on the spot. The cause of the accident: the crew made 2 fatal mistakes. First, in this kind of bad weather does not have landing situation, but the captain insisted on landing. Secondly, after the plane hit the runway for the first time without knowing the damage to the plane, the crew chose to immediately resume flight. This is undoubtedly 9 lives of death. As a result, as the altitude climbed, cracks began to appear on the plane. By the second landing, the plane was in increasingly poor condition. The maneuvering system was already out of order. At this point, all the operations of the crew cannot help. Finally, with the captain's last shout, the plane was completely disintegrated. Although this disaster was caused by human factors, but until the last moment, the crew is also doing their best to save the situation. Let's listen to the last recording of the black box leader.
Late break.